on? All right, we live, fellas. We live. So, hey, welcome everybody. Here we go to another episode of Soul of Us. It's going to be a great one. Go ahead and tap in, like, share, and we're going to get it started. So today, this episode of Soul of Us, we got two amazing guests. I'm gonna go ahead and let them introduce themselves, but go ahead and get it started with for us, Chavis.
My Davis, Memphis, Tennessee. Good friend of Hanif, and I'm coming to soak up some knowledge and hopefully feel some as well. So, welcome.
That's right. That's right. This guy right here. I mean, he's a great guy. He's a humble dude, but check him out. This guy right here was on Undefeated, a documentary about young men here in Memphis that had to overcome, and his brother's still overcoming. You see what I'm saying? He helping other young brothers overcome. So yeah, I ain't gonna let him sell himself short on the podcast. No, you're gonna go ahead and let him know.
All right. Appreciate the kind words, man.
No problem, my brother. I ain't gonna let him sell himself short on the podcast. No, you're gonna go ahead and let him know. Go ahead, Pop. Go ahead, get it started.
Okay. My name is Thomas Prey. I am a black man in America, father of black men in America. Hopefully a voice of knowledge, wisdom, understanding, peace, and love.
That's strong right there. That's strong right there. So, and I'm your host. I'm Hanif Akinyemi. And I'm here today, just to spread the love, to give you everything that you need and you're looking for in this journey to emotional wellness. Soul of Us podcast. This will be our third episode, and we got a great one for you. All right. So if you can, just go ahead, like and share it live, and we're going to get started for the podcast. So today's episode, we're going to deal with perception, right? So just a recap of the last 2 weeks, last two episodes. First episode was drawing everybody to the state of emergency on emotional wellness here in America, in the world that we live in today. Just talking about the lack of skills, the lack of, resources available for us to actually connect in meaningful ways, reconcile. So we just painted that picture that it was a state of emergency going on. And then we also in episode 2 talked about the trauma that is affecting us, that put us in that position of being either emotionally corrupt or morally corrupt or not getting the things that we want in our lives, and understanding what was the root, because we have to understand the root on the way to the, our healing, so we can know what not to fall away to, understanding ourselves, because self-awareness is the most important thing out here. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the episode topic today, and that's going to be perception. So, perception. Do we always know the reason for our actions? Or is our behavior sometimes unknowingly and unintentionally influenced by what we perceive? It has been traditionally assumed that the automatic influence of knowledge and what we gain and what we see in memory is limited to people's interpretation of the world, and it stops short of shaping their behavior. So saying that what we see, what we hear, what we believe to actually be intaking is going to be interpreted by our own sets of perceptions, right? So, and it's going to influence our behavior. So researchers in experimental social psychology have begin to challenge this assumption, saying that documenting how people's behaviors can be unknowingly influences by the knowledge that is incidentally activated by memories during social perception, right? So when we talk about perception and how perception is defined and, how it impacts us, it brings me to a study that was done during the Brown versus Board era called the Dow test. And the Dow test was basically where, they did a study with little dolls, black and white, and they were talking about, how these children perceive the dolls. They would ask them, describe this doll. What does it look like to you? And it was overwhelmingly seen from the black kids and the white kids alike that the black doll always represented bad, ugly. It was never seen in a good light, whereas the white doll was representing beauty and positivity. And what it was seen from that study is that society shapes how we see ourselves, and when it shapes how we see ourselves, it can impact our self-esteem. And that in itself can dictate how we interact with other people, how we perceive things, how we achieve success, all of those things. So that's what we here to actually talk about today. And I'm gonna leave it with this definition: perception, the noun, right? The ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through senses. So the state of being or process of becoming aware of something through senses, right? So all of your senses, your nose, your smell, physically, mentally, all of your different faculties that you input. So it could be your intuition, all of those different things. So we're here today to talk about perception. So we've defined it, and we know that perception can impact our behaviors. So fellas, what y'all got to say about that?
I'll defer to you first, Chavis.
Okay. To me, my definition of perception, of course, a mental impression that's left by, like you said, what you see, your surroundings, or all that. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that you do things by your environment. All that. I think we all make our choices, but we go through stuff and you realize, like, is it really is it really an excuse? It's not an excuse. I can look at it so many different ways from perception. I can look at it from knowing that that even though I do go through things that doesn't dictate, like, what I do. See what I'm saying?
No, that's real. That's real. I see exactly what you say. What you got, Paul?
Well, listening to what you had to say, I agree and disagree with what you're saying, because first of all, we have been conditioned to perceive things in a society that is dominated by social media, that is dominated by television, movies, music. These things have shaped our perspectives on things so that we look at things more so as a collective. It takes a stronger mind. Obviously, someone like yourself, myself, Hanif, takes a stronger mind to break away from that and actually formulate their own opinion. And when you really get down to it, perception is voiced by your opinion. Okay. So if you don't actually have an opinion, if you are a member of the flock who is simply listening to what others have to say and going along with it, basically regurgitating the mass message that is expected to drive us in a certain direction, then you don't really have your own perspective. You don't have you're not utilizing your perception because you're not formulating your own idea of what you saw, heard, smelled, touched, taste.
And like, just to weigh in on that, like, because I agree with both of you guys said, like, but I will weigh in and say, like, Chavis' perception is like something like that being an excuse. Like, that is something that, like, your perception in itself is what would allow you to say that. Just like with my pop, your perception is what like going through what you've been through and seeing what you've seen has allowed you to see and perceive why we're going through these things, and it shaped your actions. And that's what we're here to talk about, is why the things that we're going through, how they do shape our reality.
Right.
Because what we both all started on was defining it, and you defined it for you, Chavis, you defined it for you, Pop. So at the end of the day, you know, perception is big because it's really how we define everything in life.
Right. And to me, and like to go back on something Thomas said, it was we make our own decisions, but at the same time, like, you have to gain your own perspective. It's just basically an opinion, and I don't think it's a right or wrong perception. You know what I'm saying? It's all from your opinion.
Well, it's not necessarily right or wrong, but is it productive? Is it productive, or is it counterproductive? Those are the things that we need to look at. We don't need to look at simply right and wrong. Everything is not black and white, even though right now in America, that's what they would want you to believe.
No, that's real. I mean, y'all doing it, you know, y'all honing in on the topic, because just because you perceive it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's about, like you said, is it productive? Are we producing something that's positive from this? Because we got a lot of perceptions out here. Like, and what we was talking about in the previous episodes is like how we've normalized behaviors. Like, we've normalized how we interact with each other through our own perceptions, right? Through our own opinions of life. We normalize pettiness, ugliness. We haven't normalized expression. We haven't normalized, reconciling. So we really have a perception that that's not important. That's not right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I want to share a quote that I read while I was preparing for this. It says, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And if you really stop and think about that for a second, you can see things like, if you're the type of person who is quick to anger, then it takes very little for someone to hit that trigger. Okay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that was what they were aiming at. It simply was something that struck you in that manner, and it should shed a light on you to look back at yourself and see, well, why did that make me angry?
No, that's real. What you got, Jay?
I agree. I mean, I definitely agree. I agree. Totally agree with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the topic right there. Is like, you know, we want to look at why we perceive things the way we perceive them. We want to look at why we feel the way we feel. So in life, you know, we all black men, you know what I'm saying? So we've been through certain situations, and specifically the situation may be involving the cops, right? You know what I'm saying? And we have our own perceptions of the cops and our own perceptions of situations dealing with the cops. So everybody's going to deal with, you know, these situations differently. And for some of us, you know, we may respond very angrily, very aggressive, quick to fight the cops because of our perception that all cops are bad, that they only mean to harm us. You know what I'm saying? Versus some of us may have different perspectives where I'm not going to use that. I'm not going to fight in that way. I may fight in a more political way. What you got, man?
And it looked like a quote that I had read before I started as well was, change the way you look at things and the things you look at change.
Man.
Meaning, like, when I one thing I learned is like hanging out in the neighborhood. And it's just like the more I stayed there, the more content I was, and it was just in my comfort zone. So with me breaking away from there and looking at life like it's more to life than this, you know what I'm saying? And going to see different things, like just knowing that like my circumstances don't my circumstances don't how can I put it?
Dictate.
My circumstances don't define who I am, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that takes me back to something that should be real familiar to Hanif. I used to like to tell the boys to think first. You know, I used to say that this is the church of thought, and the first thing you have to do is think. You know, if you allow yourself time to think, then you can make a decision not based on a pure emotion. And although your emotion is true, real, and of consequence, it shouldn't be the only thing you use to react to a situation or circumstance.
No, that's facts. I mean, you gotta. I mean, we all have to understand why, we do the things that we do, so that we can make the best choices. The best choices. And being reflective of, where we've been, what we've been through, and how it shaped me is like invaluable information in being the best version of yourself.
I have a question that I'd like to ask the two of you. What is your perception of the Derek, what's his name, Chauvin?
You talking about George Floyd, Derek
Yeah.
Chauvin, and you saying what is my perception of the verdict, or
Yes. What is your perception? Actually, my question should be, what is your perception of the importance of the verdict?
So again, like we brought up, for black men, in situations we perceive the cops some certain way. Everybody don't have the same perceptions, but we all have had interactions with the cops. So for me and my perception of the cops, I have I've had bad experiences, I've had good experiences. So for me, I'm able to be emotionally sound and know what's going to trigger me versus what's not going to trigger me. So for me, seeing that, I just looked at it like it was one step in a good direction, but it's something that we have to see. We have to change the perception of way we are perceiving black men. It's not just holding Derek Chauvin accountable, but it's holding America accountable and seeing that black men's life are very important. It's not just about Black Lives Matter, but it's about love matters. And that black people, especially a black man, deserves love and the benefit of the doubt. And we have to change that perception that black men are inherently aggressive, or black men are inherently dangerous, or inherently will chop you down. That's, to me, was more important than just him going to jail, but having the conversation around the process, the perceptions of why he did what he did, why it was okay for him and others like him to treat certain individuals with no empathy, no remorse.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because one of the things that's been bothering me about it is that far too many of us seem to have looked at it as a giant step forward, when in fact it was simply a case in which there was no way that they could deny the heinousness, the inhumanity of what he did.
Right.
And it was as if they were saying, okay, we'll give you this one, but we're not giving y'all the rest of them. You're not going to get Breonna Taylor. or any of the others that we have unjustly slain, executed. It's like this should tide you over, or this should appease you.
And I agree, that's like something that I could see you perceiving, because one of the main things about this episode that I wanted to impart is that these perceptions are what drive us. So your behavior behind that, you perceiving that, will cause you to have resistance towards the establishment. And if we're going to work towards a greater whole, we have to be empathetic and understanding of diverse perceptions, and specifically within our community, understanding that some of us aren't okay with just a little tap on the shoulder. Some of us perceive that we need drastic change or drastic upheaval of what's going on, because it's very traumatic to other people. And that's another thing that we have to see, that just because you may not perceive it as trauma, or you may not perceive it as harmful, doesn't mean that the next person, regardless of color, creed, or race, doesn't perceive it as something egregious and horrific, and it is life-shaping for them. So we all have to have a open mind to the way people perceive things, because that is like the root of how people interact with the world. So when we saying interacting with folks and having good relationship skills and being able to build good foundations with people in society, we have to be open to the different ways of perceiving life, the different ways of perceiving events and experiences.
Is there any information that you are aware of that talks about self-perception?
Yes. I mean, that's all of the information that, I like to look at myself as your favorite mental health coach. And all of this information about self-perception is really self-awareness. It's self-awareness. It's the core root of social emotional learning, emotional intelligence. It's the core root of emotional literacy. So perceiving and self-perception is something that is major. It is major. Self-awareness. So understanding, who I am and how I interact with the world is, it's pivotal. It's monumental. Because when we hear that term, oh, that person lost, and they're not self-aware. They're not perceiving that the things that they're doing may be off key, maybe off kilter. Like they don't have the perception that I'm harming someone, or that my actions aren't going to benefit me in a positive way. So we gotta get this information on social emotional learning. And it starts with self-awareness. That's the root of building a better person and building a better society, is self first before we can really do anything else. We have to build that perception and positive perceptions, right? So within ourselves and within society.
Okay, understanding that, would you agree that the overwhelming majority of people, when they are in social settings, or I won't say overwhelming majority, would you agree that there is a large number of people who promote a facade, who promote a perception that they want you to believe, even though they don't believe it themselves?
And man, that's a great question. I mean, that's what this conversation is about. We have to see that our maladaptive behaviors that we've normalized are the reasons why we're getting the results we get. So there's a large population of people in the world today, because of social media, because of the way society has trained us to perceive each other and ourselves, that we would rather present ourselves in a fake way. We would rather present ourselves in an inauthentic way to seemingly be accepted by society, a friend group, a girl, a guy, a job. Inauthenticity has become the norm, because we perceive that that is the way that I'm going to get the way things that I want to get. We perceive that me being authentic is the best way for me to operate. You know what I'm saying?
Or not so much operate, but fit in.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that we really have to look at is how important it is to so many people to fit in, to belong, to be able to see themselves as part of something, and how difficult it can be in certain instances to step out of that shadow and cast your own.
Right. I mean, it's major, major, because you got to step into your own, who you are. You got to step into, I was just having a conversation yesterday about this very same subject, about standing on your truth, or as you say it, standing up for what you believe in, setting your values, knowing your values, right? So it's pivotal for you to know your values, know who you are, so then you can get what's coming to you. See, when you pretend to be somebody else, you're not gonna get what's coming to you. You're gonna get what's coming to that character, or that lifestyle. And a lot of times we pretending to be things that's really not beneficial to us. That's not going to bring us the love, the empowerment, the support. It's going to bring us even more inauthenticity. People, you being fake gonna beget fakeness. You know what I'm saying? It's like you out here being you know what you call it, deceitful, or not being real with everybody. You become comfortable, so those behaviors is what you seek to be around, and you're going to be around a lot of people who are not going to be real, and that doesn't get emotional health. Like, that doesn't help a person become emotionally well. See, again, we actually, uh we actually have normalized this state of trauma and this state of mm, just being ugly, right? But we know we want better. We know, and deep in our heart of hearts, we want better. But because we don't have those skills, because we haven't practiced them, we do what's normal. We do what comes to us, and it harms us. It takes us away, and we become dark. It's like I was having a conversation. Life is like Star Wars. It's like you got the force, you got the light, you got the dark. And the longer we stay in our dark perceptions, the longer we stay in our negative experiences, it takes us to a place that dictates our behavior. Now we have cynical ways of thinking. Now we treat people in a way where we become the perpetrator because we perceive this as normal now. We perceive this is okay. It all goes with our moral injury. That's why perception is so big, because it can determine your position in this world. It can determine how far you're going to go in this world. It can determine who you allow around you and who you actually attract.
What is the impact of education on perception?
Everything, everything, everything. That was
So
the whole thing.
you would say that is the root from which the tree has to grow.
Yes, sir. I mean, knowledge is power. They always say that's the only thing that can't take from you. So if you're being in everything about, what Unified Stance is about is education, empowering. You know, Mental health coaching isn't therapy, it's about practical behaviors being learned, practical skills that haven't been taught, because the education is where we're failing. We're not teaching kids how to perceive themselves in a positive light. That's like racial socialization. So what I mean by that, that's like having a strong sense of self due to who you are. So it could be a black kid growing up in America where, you see that what's, colorism, lighter is better, and you being from a low socioeconomic or poor neighborhood, you get treated a certain way. These are the things that we have to be cognizant of. We have to uh, be aware of, because our education can either help us or harm us while we're going through these things. And right now, the education that these kids are receiving, that adults are receiving, are not bringing us any closer to having better relations, are not bringing us any closer to raising good, well-adjusted kids. Flat out. Let me ask you a question, being from your generation, right? How do you perceive the change in cultural perception from the time when you were a child to now?
I think the biggest change that has come in cultural perception from my childhood is how the neighbor has come off of neighborhood.
Mm.
And we see each other as obstacles or opponents more so than as neighbors, as actual tools for the betterment of all.
Hmm.
And I think that is exemplified by the fact that you could walk down a major city street now and knock on 15 doors and maybe find 3 families that know 3 other families out of that 15. When I was a child coming up, we knew everybody for 4 or 5 blocks.
Mm.
And it wasn't as if it was somebody that you had to see every day. It wasn't as if it was somebody that you had to go to school with. It was simply somebody that you saw in the neighborhood and you knew them and they knew you, and you looked out for each other. I try not to judge people based on age or age alone, because age is simply a number that's indicative of how long you've been here. Okay. But the sense of maturity is something that I see lacking in a lot of people over a lot of different age groups. And I think that's something that has come once again from things like social media. I don't think it's beneficial to live your life as if your Facebook friends are real friends.
Hmm.
Okay. Because a lot of people are simply looking at having a higher friend count than somebody else.
Hmm.
And it took me actually getting on Facebook myself to realize that it's not a completely bad thing, because my reluctance was that it was something that was unnecessary, something that was beyond having any real productive value. But in actually getting on, I found that you could make some connections that were real, where that Facebook friend is someone that you could actually consider a friend, because there can be many definitions of friend. And there can be different levels of friend. But in order to actually call someone a friend, in my estimation, it has to be someone who has some level of care and concern about you.
Mm.
They don't have to be somebody that you could go to tomorrow and say, yo, man, I need $5. You got it? But it has to be somebody that if they hear that something happened to you, they're going to want to know what happened.
Right.
How did that happen? Why did that happen?
Right.
Are you okay? Because,
So, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was just what you said about the perception changing from more interpersonal interaction, you actually knowing who around you and having somewhat of a connection to real life people has changed to now we're in a society where folks don't really interact on a real interpersonal level in real life. We're more geared towards the digital interaction that may not hold any weight.
Yeah, because I read a study where they asked 1,000 people, would they rather make a phone call or send a text?
Mm.
Out of that 1,000 people, over 70% of them said send a text.
Mm.
And these were people of varying ages, demographics. And my personal perspective is that there are things that you simply cannot articulate through a text. I don't care how good a writer you are, and I personally happen to think that I am a very good writer, and I don't think that there are things that I could actually articulate through a text.
And then it plays on what we're talking about here, like perception, because you don't know like how someone's going to perceive your text message without you being there. So they may perceive your tone, your language, your, what the things that you're actually saying as aggressive, and you may not even meant it that way, but because of perception and what we're talking about, you leave it wide open with text message because there's no real interpersonal react. You're not able to validate the emotional exchange. You're not there to be able to validate where your actually idea is coming from, and you're only allowing their perceptions, which is built by what they've been through, what they've experienced, and not knowing who you're talking to. If you don't know who you're talking to and you send a text message and it's all capital letters and you're just like, oh, I had the caps on, but this person has been through lots of trauma, they're going to perceive you yelling at them.
Not even lots of trauma, a bad day.
Yeah.
They could have had a bad day and simply look at it like, oh, you want to go there.
Right. Oh, you just like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? You want some too? It's like, man, like all I did was send a text message. So, I feel you. And that's why perception is so big, because perception is really what dictates a lot of our world, our reality, and how, how things play out. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like how things play out, in our lives, at the root of those things is our perception. And we have to make sure our perception is aligned with a good moral compass, with good principles, with good ideals. Because like they said, your attitude determines your altitude. So if you have perceptions that are very dark, very negative, kind of, like you're putting roadblocks in front of you because the world interacts in a positive way. So that's when you have people who have to pretend to be positive to get the things that they want, but they're not really. And you can see that they're not authentic. You know what I'm saying? Because the minute that the camera's off, you see their real behavior. The minute that they're in a different situation, you can see, oh, you just doing that to get what you want. So we have to have this discernment. We have to just wake up and be more self-aware, so then we can be socially aware to other people's perceptions, because we know our own perceptions. We know how we're going to perceive things. We know why we perceive things. So we can then understand other people and why they perceive things and why they respond.
Yeah, good analogy on what I was saying earlier about how you perceive different friendships. I have a friend who has cancer, and anyone who really knows me knows that I've had to deal with that beast a whole lot in my lifetime.
Right.
So when my friend put out this post, someone who I've known for 50 years, okay, I immediately did what the post asked me to do. I copied and pasted it onto my page. And I was surprised, I have to admit, I was surprised by some of the people who were concerned that what was related in the post was my issue, that I was the one who was fighting cancer, who had dealt with the chemo, and wanted to know if my friends cared about me or not. And there were a couple people on there that I was kind of I must admit I was a little surprised that they were the ones that responded. So that showed me that I had an impact on them that I was not aware of. And that they had some genuine care, genuine concern for my well-being. I don't know if they did what the post asked them to do. They copied and pasted it as it was directed, but they asked me questions. They posted comments that, are you all right?
Nah, that I feel like, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Let me say that, because that's perception is really, a key thing in how people deal with you. So, us being more aware of that and being aware of how people, are living their lives and what's going on with them, is going to allow for us to have like beautiful experiences. Because like you said, I know your experience. I know what you've been through. And you putting that out there, people perceiving you one way, and you perceiving people in one way, right?
Yeah.
It gave root for just you being authentic and knowing that, putting yourself out there allow for other people to show their authenticity. And then y'all able to have a better perception of each other. You know what I'm saying? Because they assume one thing and you'll assume one thing. And what we know is that these assumptions dictate our actions. You know what I'm saying?
Without a doubt.
So we have to be able to, like you said, be open-minded, and have a good self-awareness so we can see what's in front of us. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But that's dope, that you even in that space to receive that love. Because some people don't, once they have their mind made up, it is what it is. That's another thing that I was talking about yesterday with one of the good brothers, is that he said in his opinion that we've adopted that it is what it is mentality to our harm. And I agree with him to a certain extent, because we shouldn't have it is what it is mentality with everything.
No, not with everything.
Not with everything. Some things we should challenge it. Some things we should address it. Some things we should, take, head on. Whereas though some other things it is what it is, was not within my control or our control, and we have to take it in stride. But we have to have a better perception of what those things are versus the things that we need to stand tall for, that we need to address. You know what I'm saying? And not just having it is what it is. Like, I don't got good relationships. It is what it is. I don't know how to communicate. It is what it is.
Well, I don't think you should have an "it is what it is" attitude about anything that's going to impact your life substantially, whether it be for the good, for the bad. If it's going to impact your life substantially in some way, then you have to address the change that it's going to make. You have to be ready for it if it's something good, and be in a mindset to capitalize on it. Otherwise, you will miss an opportunity that could have changed your life. And if it's bad, then you have to be ready. I mean, if it's going to impact you in a bad way, then you have to be ready to deal with the repercussions that are going to come from it, whether they be physical, emotional. The repercussions that are going to come from it are going to be something that you have to deal with, whether you want to or not. So you can't simply say that it is what it is. But if it's not going to impact you in a major way, or in a substantial way, I won't say major, in a substantial way, then then it's really not that relevant. So
the only thing I would push back on with that is saying that only thing that when it comes to this is what it is, if it's not going to impact you in that major way, like if it's impacting somebody else in a major way, or if it's causing major harm and you can see that, then I just think that we got this mentality: if it ain't on my doorstep, or if it ain't happening to my family, or if it's whatever happens in my family state, like, nah, we gotta
well, once again that goes back to caring about other people. That goes back to that levels of friend. Okay. Yeah. So if it's impacting someone that you care about, or someone that you know, okay, or someone that you think should be helped, then it's impacting you. So it is impacting you at that point.
And that's what I'm glad we got here, because that's the thing. Like, we so emotionally numb that we watch the pain. We've normalized the pain, but we know in our heart of hearts it's pain. Like, that's not right. That's messed up. Oh, they going through the most. You see what I'm saying? And we'll verbalize it, but we won't seek to rectify the situation or seek to aid and help the situation. We just say, we address it as it is what it is. Like, that's messed up. And we have to get back to, like you said, putting that neighbor on there, being there for each other in an emotionally available way, and advocating for each other. And it's not just the Black community. This is human being. Like, this is good, good ways of being for anybody who breathes air. Okay, like anybody who's walking, their heart is beating. It is good for you to just be self-aware and be able to interact with the world in a way that you're in service to your fellow man or woman.
But we have to get past what I like to refer to as meism that became prevalent in, I would say, the 90s, and has matriculated into a way of thinking in the new millennium. It's like, if it don't make me $1, it's not important to me. If it don't make me happy, then I ain't got time.
But then they don't know what happiness really is, because our happiness is tied to money and material things.
And that is true for a lot of people, because that is what capitalism has inundated the mindset of the average American to believe.
Right. 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 And that's to our detriment. Like that perception of life is something that has to be checked at the door. Like, what are you fighting for? Is it just for money? Is it just for material things that do not hold any real sustenance that can actually empower you on an internal level? You know, because I seen a brother that he Instagram influencer, and he basically went on there and made a post that said, bro, it's not that you ugly, it's that you don't have enough money. And then, you know, he got a lot of backlash. He got a lot of people agree, didn't agree. So that's his perception. So he then further went to elaborate his perception. And his perception is that money uh, money shows validates inner success, right? Money shows that you like are confident and you're in a good place, and women seek security, and he was just basically saying how money is going to be what validates you in life. So it's not that you're not a good looking brother, it's that you don't have enough money to validate you in life. And these are the perceptions that are at the core of why we have so many relationships and so many personality dysfunctions. You know what I'm saying?
So my question to him would be, when the market crashed and all of those millionaires lost all their money, did they all suddenly become worthless? Did they? Is that what you believe made them jump out of windows because their life was over because they no longer had money?
And I look at it like he probably not even thinking that far, because he would say something like, you know, money validates your inner success. And I'm like, at the end of the day, there's people with money who are morally and socially corrupt.
Bankrupt. Not
Bankrupt.
corrupt, bankrupt.
Bankrupt. So it's like I heard a saying the other day. It was like some of the most poorest people in life are people who only have money. And it's because they're poor with all of the other things in life, like love, like loyalty, like consistency. You know what I'm saying? You know, some of those things that we take for granted, you know, but when you alone and all you got is money, you're gonna be like trying to buy those things.
Or trying to protect your wealth. Or you're just going to spend a lot of time trying to protect your wealth. That is how lawyers have instituted the ideology of a prenup.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you come into the relationship after I've made the money, then I need to know that you're here for me and not for the dollars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is a sad way to find love.
Yeah, I mean, it's a capitalistic society that people are operating out of. So if we perceive that money and material things are what validate us, and like my generation, we look at it like we got to be the financial. We like, before I settle down, I got to be financially stable years old. You know what I'm saying? That's like how they coming now. Like we look at like I gotta have a house, I gotta have a car. We don't. It's like the skills to build, to grow, to have good relations. We don't have that. All we know is because that's what society has taught us, and we perceive as a good life is going to work. It's working. Everything is a business, and we treat each other like business. Everything's transactional. What you do for me. What am I getting out of this? We don't love without expectation or love in an unconditional way. So, and that's due to our perceptions, due to what our goal values, our goal sets are, what we know to be true to us because of what, you know, how we've grown up. You know what I'm saying?
And when what we've been taught And repetition, okay? Repetition is the greatest teacher of all time.
And then say repetition rules the mind.
And if you look at any television show, or heck, if you watch a YouTube video long enough, you're going to get ads. You're going to get those ads, and those ads are calculated and directed towards different demographics in order to maximize profits for the company posting the ad. So, in a way, they are shapers of perception.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's real. That's why we having this conversation, so we can all be conscientious of how our perceptions are constantly being shaped. Whether it's ads about makeup and beauty, whether it's ads about crime and poverty, whether it's ads about money and politics, our perceptions of life are constantly being shaped. So if we don't take hold of those things and start to set our own perceptions, set our own values, we're constantly going to be getting what society has set for us versus what we desire on an internal level.
You spoke on it earlier when you talked about the children and the dolls. Okay, think about the biggest commercials. Think about the biggest kids movies. Think about the most well-known children's stories, books. Who's in them? What do they depict?
Yeah.
What don't they depict?
Right.
That's really the crux of the matter right there, is what don't they depict? When did The Princess and the Frog get released?
That was in the 2000s.
Okay, so when was the first movie released?
Shoot, 1700s, 1800s.
The first spoken movie was released in the 1920s.
Oh, that's right. Because you had Birth of a Nation was the first full-length feature film that really hit the nation, and that was like the early 1900s.
So even before then, when you go to before mass media, you had the local general store. Yeah. You had, billboards. You had the media of the day. Mm. And that media still depicted the same things. So, yeah, you can go back to the 1700s, 1800s, and look at how media in all its forms and iterations has controlled the mindsets of people starting in their childhood days.
Mm-hmm. No, that's real. I mean, that's real. Like even with the massacre in Williamsport, North Carolina, I think it was, where they had like the first election where like all of the representatives were black and they couldn't take it. So what they did was a propaganda campaign demonizing blacks, demonizing the upliftment of black culture as a threat to white culture. And like you said, it's like that's really what we've been dealing with in this divisive world, is like the propaganda is what like shapes our perceptions, Yeah, like media is a propaganda machine. So you don't necessarily know what they're saying is true or not, but you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. So it's like the allegory of the cave. You begin to see the perceptions of the mass media versus actually seeing reality.
Yeah.
And we don't check that. You know, you always talk about I'm free, but like ultimately, where are your thoughts coming from? You know, especially in our community. When we hear little things like, you got good hair. You know, you got the nice eyes, or you got good skin. You know what I'm saying? Like, where did that start? Or you hear old school folks like, when you gonna perm that girl hair?
Yeah,
When
well,
you
you know where it started at.
No, I know where it started, but for people who are listening, they need to start to think like that.
Yeah,
Like, where are my perceptions coming from? Why do I even say that? Or why is it okay for me to do these things? Right? Because then it's that self-awareness. Then you can start to see how socially you've been socially impacted, how you're contributing into what you know is being put out here. And like you said earlier, you spoke on it. We are, you know, go along with the get alongs. We rather be with the rest of them than to stand on our own and be who we supposed to be, you know?
but how you know I spoke on it and I believe in it, but at the same time, I feel as though not there are not enough people who are promoting the idea of individualized thinking, of original thought processes. And I believe that, we can't depend upon anyone but ourselves to instill that in forthcoming generations.
And that's real. I mean, that's again, that's why I asked you earlier, how did you see this culture had changed from when you were a child to now? Because that's one of the major things right there, what you just said. Like, I believe generations of the past understood that and made sure that they kept different coping mechanisms and different ways of sharing the information and sharing the experience, so it did shape you in a way that you never forgot. You understood what was at stake and what's going on.
I want to know if there's any literature, um, movies, any type of media that you could suggest or recommend to people that would allow them to get some level of enlightenment as to the topics that we're talking about.
So one highly valuable resource that I would recommend everybody to go to is it's the national it's the network for trauma and stress. So, just to become aware of what stress and trauma is, because they talk about all of these different things, right? But then you also can just type in keywords like emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, social emotional learning for adults, and it's going to start to bring your mindset around what we're talking about knowing your values, knowing your why, knowing how to react to certain things, how to control yourself, how to get better relations. That's where you would start with those key terms. But these folks who are looking to be more enlightened can always follow the Soul of Us podcast. Always reach out to Unified Stance Family Services. And mental health coaching is available. We have the Soul of Us group, support group. So for those who need those resources, we're trying to change the perceptions and really don't know how to, never don't know where to start, just keep following us and look up those key terms: social emotional learning, emotional literacy, or what they call your EQ, your emotional intelligence. And with all of those things, you'll be able to find different resources. And we also offer classes, master classes on emotional awareness, emotional wellness. So they can always check into us. Like, we have a class coming up next week, one of our interest meetings. Just check us out. Follow us, like, subscribe, YouTube, and I'm go ahead and put up all our our different ways to subscribe. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts. But we are constantly, week to week, going to be giving out resources, giving out skills and techniques. This is a podcast for mental health coaching. We're trying to help facilitate folks on this emotional journey to, on this journey to emotional wellness. So again, the resources are out there, and I tell you, if you are going through issues in your life and they're severe, please get help. Please reach out. Even if it's not me, don't normalize going through what you're going through. Get help. Seek a therapist. If you don't find a good one, keep seeking. Don't give up. Don't give up on yourself. We have to, as people, invest in ourselves. We sat here for the last hour and we talked about perception and talked about how it affects us. And we'll sit here and we'll know how we're affected and impacted, but we won't be invested in the solutions. And the solutions here are practicing the skills, learning the skills, getting with people who can support you holistically through this process. So if you listen to the podcast, you're going through things, because mental health is a spectrum. You may not be on the far wide end where you need intensive outpatient or inpatient care. You may be on the lower perspective where you're just going through certain experiences, and you just need some reinforcement onto how to better these experiences, how to take your life to a further fulfillment, to gain more fulfillment from your life. So I say all that to say, Soul of Us is here to impart those resources. And if you just follow us, you'll gain a lot of resources, valuable information. I appreciate you, Pop, for coming on. Chavis, he lasted for a little while. Hopefully I'll be able to get him on again. But I still think it was valuable conversation in perception.
I think any conversation that you can have that promotes thought, whether it be how people perceive things or how they see themselves. Like you said, self-awareness. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have right now, is that so many of us are not self-aware.
Right.
So many of us are simply, like you said, go along to get along. So many of us need to belong, need to be part of something, and don't know what to be part of because we have no historical context as to what we have the capability of becoming or being.
Right. No, that's real. I appreciate that, because that's what Soul of Us is all about, is imparting that change, imparting that we're bridging the gap, because people want a different life but don't know how to get there. So self-awareness is that first component of social emotional learning. Self-awareness. We starting with the first, like state of emergency, call to action. Are you aware of that this is going on? Are you aware that this is how we got here? And that's what we're honing in on, provoking that thought, so that thought can provoke change. So we can change ourselves and impact our own environments. And maybe our environment that we impact can then impact the whole environment. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and that's what I hope. That's what I hope we can accomplish.
Yeah. So I appreciate you, Pop. Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the people?
I just gave my final thoughts is that we just need to look back so that we can see where we are and where we need to go.
That's right. And I mean, with that being said, look back at your own perceptions. Look back at your own feelings and emotions around things that's going on in your life. Ask yourself why. Ask yourself, how can I change? Do I need help? Do I already have the resources? If I do need the resources, what do I need? Set some goals for yourself And with that being said, Soul of Us is here every week to impart different information to help you succeed in accomplishing those goals. So we love y'all. You know, another one in the books, episode 3, Perception, featuring Chavis Daniels and Thomas Prey. I'm Hanif Akiemi, your host. Follow us again at Unified Stance Family Service Facebook, at Soul of Unified Stance Instagram, Soul of Us Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts. Signing off. It was another good one. Peace and blessings to y'all. Have a good weekend.